Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hi, Herman and Corin. So I think the most beloved of our everyday devices is probably the smartphones that we carry around with us and our tablets. And these things, of course, to state the obvious, need to be charged. And I mentioned that I'm in a decluttering phase at the moment, so that when we move next in a few months, we're as lean as we can be. And there's something very frustrating about finding things that you haven't even used yet. I remember picking up a couple of extra Qualcomm 3 cables when that was like the latest and greatest in charging tech. And now, after moving up to a OnePlus, I see that these are basically dead. They're useless. This is the standard before the standard. We moved on to PD 20, 65 watt, and now you can find 100 watt and 240 watt cables on the market. So I think the best thing for me to do is probably to throw these in the trash, because it gets very confusing when you're trying to find a charging cable and you've got a bunch of ones that are maybe fast or maybe not, and you just lose track over time because you have this maximum charging speed that these everyday cables support, and then you have stuff like SuperVOOC, which is what OnePlus bakes into its chargers and negotiates a higher charging speed. And the world of charging is more complicated than meets the eye, because you have the power outlet sending DC after the adapter up to the phone, and they will negotiate a link so that, if I'm not mistaken, the general case these days is that if you have an ultra fast charger, you're not going to probably fry your phone if it doesn't support it, but you'll just get a slower charging speed. I have two specific questions, Herman and Corin, because there's just so much stuff on the market, and some of it's kind of cluttery. We have GaN chargers, we have these ultra fast, and let's be honest, it of course is ideal to use the OEM charger, the one that came with your phone, and only the ones that the phone manufacturer actually sells. But we live in the real world, and in a lot of situations, if you're missing a spare cable for your phone, most folks are going to just drop into their nearest quick convenience store, and they're going to buy a cable, and they're not going to go on a hunt through the country to find the OnePlus OEM cable that is exactly fitted to their phone. My question, Herman and Corin, is if one wanted to get a couple of charging cables today for your phones, and maybe they can do your laptop, and you don't want to buy something that's going to be almost instantly deprecated. USB A to C, my assumption has always been that C to C has the more robust future. If you're looking at buying charging banks and charging stations now, I would think that to be future-proof, you'd probably be best advised to, you might need one or two Type A's for older stuff, but optimized for Type C interfaces. But in terms of charging capabilities, like what is a fast standard today that can work across many devices? And as important as the charger is the cable. I've learned from experience that these are not created equal. It often seems like a complete crapshoot that you'll buy a cable from the internet that'll say it does ultra fast charging and data. You'll connect it to your phone, and lo and behold, the phone isn't recognized, the data link doesn't work, and then you'll open up another cable that doesn't do fast charging, or it's in the same batch and it does work. So I'm kind of confused by the whole thing. Herman and Corin, let's talk about the Savvy Tech Consumer's Guide to Picking Up Chargers and Cables. We don't want to just buy random things that make great claims. How do you actually figure out what's the fastest charger you can get? And if one had, as I suspect many of our listeners do, you have a whole family now of things that need a charge, right? When I go to bed, I so often more nights than not, I would say I forget to charge things, and then the next day it becomes a stress because I need to jump out to the post office and my phone's out of battery, and then I say, well, I have my power bank, and whoops, I forgot to charge the power bank, that's out of battery too. So if you have a whole armada of devices, your power bank, your phone, your Bluetooth devices, and they've different charging capabilities. If you want to put them into one thing to charge them up, you need to make sure that the cumulative output is that what you're buying is capable of that. So how do you actually do that spec-in calculation? And can you find something that'll do all those gizmos and give you a bit of headroom for the future? Herman and Corin, let's talk about charging tech in today's episode of My Word Prompts.
You know, Herman, I was looking through that old junk drawer in the kitchen this morning, and it is a literal graveyard of dead technologies. I found at least 3 different versions of those thick multi-pin cables from the early 2000s, a bunch of mini universal serial bus cables, and a tangled mess of what I think were proprietary camera chargers. It is overwhelming. It is like a physical timeline of my own frustration with the electronics industry. I even found one of those old circular Nokia chargers that looked like a tiny needle. Remember those?
Herman Poppleberry here. And Corn, you're describing the archaeological layers of the digital age. That drawer is basically a stratigraphic record of how companies used to try and lock us into their specific ecosystems by changing the shape of a hole. It is funny you mention that because Daniel's prompt today is actually about this exact frustration. He is in the middle of a major decluttering phase and is looking at the current state of charging technology, wondering if we have finally reached a point of stability or if he is just going to be throwing more cables away in 2 years. He wants to know if the one cable to rule them all dream is finally a reality or just another marketing promise.
It is a fair question. He specifically wanted to know if the Universal Serial Bus Type-C to Type-C interface is truly the future-proof choice right now. And more practically, how someone with a laptop, a phone, and a power bank can actually calculate their power needs to find one single charger that does it all. He is tired of carrying a brick for his MacBook, a brick for his Samsung, and a separate one for his portable battery.
It is a great prompt because while it feels like things are getting simpler with everything moving to that small oval plug, the underlying technology is actually getting more complex. We are seeing these massive numbers now, like 100 watt and 240 watt charging. It is not just about the shape of the plug anymore. It is about the conversation happening between the charger, the cable, and the device. We have moved from dumb power, where a wire just carried electricity, to smart power, where there is a literal digital handshake before a single electron moves at high speed.
That conversation is where I want to start. Daniel mentioned he had some old Qualcomm Quick Charge, 3 cables that are basically useless to him now that he has moved to a OnePlus device with SuperVoot technology. Why does that happen? If the cable fits, why does the fast charging just stop working? It feels like a betrayal. You see the fast charging icon disappear, and suddenly it says 8 hours until full.
That is the big frustration. In the early days of fast charging, we had what I called the Wild West of standards. Companies like Qualcomm, Oppo, and OnePlus all developed their own proprietary ways to shove more power into a battery without it exploding. They did this by manipulating the voltage and the amperage in very specific ways that only their own chargers and cables understood. For example, OnePlus and Oppo used a system that put the heat management in the brick rather than the phone, which required a very thick, specialized cable to carry high current at low voltage.
So it is like they are speaking different languages. My OnePlus charger is speaking French to my phone, but the old Qualcomm cable only understands German. They can see each other. They are standing in the same room, but they can't coordinate a complex task.
Exactly. And when they do not understand each other, they fall back to a basic, slow safety standard. It is a protective measure. If the phone cannot verify that the cable and charger can handle high power, it says, okay, I am only going to take 5 watts or maybe 10 watts so nothing catches on fire. But that is why Daniel is seeing those cables become obsolete. They were designed for a specific proprietary language that is being phased out in favor of something called power delivery, or PD.
Power delivery. We see that on almost every high-end charger now. Is that the universal language we've been waiting for? Is this the end of the Tower of Babel for chargers?
For the most part, yes. Power delivery is part of the official Universal Serial Bus Standard. It is designed to be the one language to rule them all. It can scale from tiny amounts of power for your earbuds all the way up to 240 watts for high-performance laptops. This is why the answer to Daniel's first question is a resounding yes. Type-C to Type-C is the most future-proof interface you can buy today. In fact, the European Union has mandated that by the end of 2024, all mobile phones, tablets, and cameras sold in the EU must use a universal serial bus Type-C charging port. By 2026, that extends to laptops.
That is a huge shift. But wait, I have seen Type A to Type C cables everywhere. You know, the ones with the big rectangular plug on one end that you see in airplanes or older cars. Why are those not the future? They seem so much more common.
Because the Type A connector is physically limited. It was never designed to handle the high wattage we need today. It lacks the communication pins necessary for the modern power delivery handshake. To get to those higher speeds, you need the extra pins and the communication protocols that only exist in a full Type-C to Type-C connection. If you are using a Type A to Type-C cable, you are almost always capped at much lower speeds, usually around 15 to 18 watts, or you are relying on older, less efficient standards. If you want to be ready for the next 5 to 10 years, you want a charger with Type-C ports and cables that are Type-C on both ends. The Type A port is a legacy relic at this point.
Okay, so Type-C to Type-C is the move. But Daniel also mentioned these new 100 watt and 240 watt cables. If I'm just charging a phone that only takes 25 watts, like a standard iPhone or a base model Samsung, is there any reason for me to buy a 240 watt cable? Or is that just overkill? Am I just spending extra money for no reason?
It is overkill for today, but it is the definition of future proofing. Here is the thing people do not realize about cables. Once you go above 60 watts, the cable actually needs a brain.
A brain? Like a literal computer chip inside the cable? That sounds like science fiction. Why does a wire need a chip?
Precisely. It is called an E-marker chip. It stands for electronically marked. This chip tells the charger, hey, I am a high-quality cable and I am rated to handle 5 amps of current. Without that chip, a power delivery charger will refuse to send more than 60 watts through the cable, even if the charger and the laptop are both capable of 100 watts. It is a safety governor. If you try to push 100 watts through a cheap, thin wire without an E-marker, the wire could literally melt or start a fire.
So if Daniel buys a cheap Type-C cable from a gas station and tries to charge his laptop with it, it might only charge at half speed because the cable cannot vouch for itself. It is like the cable doesn't have the right security clearance to handle the high voltage stuff.
Exactly. The charger sees a cable with no E-marker and says, I do not trust this wire not to melt, so I am capping the output at 60 watts. This is why Daniel is feeling confused. You can have a great charger and a great laptop, but if the cable is the weak link, the whole system slows down. If you buy a cable rated for 240 watts today, it will have the best E-marker chip available, and it will work for basically any device you buy for the next decade. The 240 watt spec is part of the new Universal Serial Bus Power Delivery 3.1 standard, which uses higher voltages, up to 48 volts, to get that massive power through the same small plug.
That is a really important distinction. It is not just a piece of copper anymore. It is a smart component. Now, let us get into the math Daniel asked about. He has a phone, a laptop, and a power bank. He wants one charger. How does he calculate what he needs? Do you just add the numbers up? If my laptop is 65 and my phone is 25, do I need a 90-watt charger?
Not necessarily, and this is where savvy consumers can save a lot of money. You have to look at two things, the peak requirement of your most demanding device and your typical simultaneous usage. Most people think they need to sum everything up, but that assumes every device is pulling maximum power at the exact same moment, which is rare.
Okay, let us use a real-world example. Say Daniel has a MacBook Air that takes 65 watts, a phone that takes 30 watts, and a power bank that can fast charge at 45 watts. If he adds those up, that is 140 watts. Does he need a 140-watt charger? Those are pretty big and expensive.
only if he needs to charge all of them from 0 to 100% at the absolute maximum speed at the exact same time, which in reality almost never happens. Most of the time, your laptop is just sipping power to stay topped up, maybe 15 or 20 watts, and your phone might be at 80% where it naturally slows down its intake anyway. Batteries charge in a curve. They pull the most power when they are empty and slow down as they fill up to protect the battery chemistry.
So we could probably get away with a 100-watt charger.
Easily, and here is why. Modern multi-port chargers use something called dynamic power allocation. When you plug in just the laptop, the charger's internal controller gives the full 65 or 100 watts to that port. When you plug in the phone, the charger renegotiates. It might say, okay, I will give 65 watts to the laptop and 20 watts to the phone. If you plug in a third device, it might drop the laptop to 45 watts.
I have noticed that with my charger at home. When I plug in my watch, my laptop screen flickers for a second, or the charging icon disappears and reappears. Is that the renegotiation happening? Is it like the charger is doing a quick roll call?
That is exactly what it is. The charger is literally resetting the power handshake to redistribute the wattage based on its internal logic. So, for Daniel, the calculation should be, what is the maximum power my biggest device can take? If his laptop is a 65-watt machine, he should look for a charger where at least one port can hit 65 watts. Then he should look for a total capacity that covers his biggest device plus a bit of headroom for the others. A 100-watt charger is the sweet spot for most people right now. It allows for a full-speed laptop charge plus a fast phone charge simultaneously.
100 watts seems to be the magic number. It is enough for a serious laptop and a phone simultaneously. But what about gallium nitride? We see GaN written on all these new small chargers. It sounds like something out of a Marvel movie. Is that just marketing fluff to make a brick sound high-tech?
Oh, gallium nitride is the real deal. It is probably the biggest leap in power electronics in 30 years. Traditional chargers use silicon transistors. Silicon is great. It built the modern world, but it has a physical limit. It gets very hot when you push a lot of power through it, which means you need big heat sinks, lots of air gap, and a lot of physical space. Gallium nitride is a semiconductor material with a wide band gap. That is a nerdy way of saying it can handle higher voltages and switch faster with much less energy loss as heat.
Which is why we can now get a 100-watt charger that is the size of an old 5-watt iPhone brick. I remember the old 60-watt MacBook chargers were the size of a sandwich. Now they fit in a coin pocket.
Exactly. It allows for higher power density. If Daniel is decluttering, gallium nitride is his best friend. He can replace 4 or 5 bulky old chargers with one gallium nitride block that fits in his pocket. It is more efficient, it stays cooler, and it lasts longer because heat is the #1 killer of electronics. When a charger is more efficient, it means more of the electricity from your wall is actually going into your battery instead of being wasted as heat in the room.
So we have established Type-C. The Type-C is the future. We know we need e-marker chips for high wattage. We know gallium nitride is the material to look for. But there is one more acronym Daniel mentioned that I think we need to clear up. PPS. I see that on some spec sheets but not others. What is programmable power supply? Is that just another version of power delivery?
This is the secret sauce for phone charging, especially for Samsung and Google Pixel users. Standard power delivery usually jumps in fixed steps, like 5 volts, 9 volts, 15 volts, or 20 volts. But batteries are finicky. As they fill up, their ideal voltage changes. If a charger provides 9 volts, but the battery really wants 7.8 volts, the phone has to convert that extra voltage inside the device, which generates a lot of heat.
So PPS allows the charger to adjust the voltage in tiny increments instead of big jumps. It is like a dimmer switch instead of a 3-way bulb.
Yes, it can adjust in 20 millivolt increments. This is crucial because it reduces conversion loss inside the phone. When the charger provides the exact voltage the battery wants, the phone's internal charging circuit doesn't have to work as hard, which means the phone stays much cooler while charging. This is how Samsung gets their super fast charging speeds. If your charger doesn't have PPS, your Samsung phone might fall back to standard 15-watt charging even if the charger is a 100-watt brick.
And heat is the enemy of battery health. If I want my phone to last 3 or 4 years, I want it to stay cool.
Exactly. If you want your phone battery to last 3 or 4 years instead of 2, you want a charger that supports programmable power supply. It is an optional part of the power delivery standard, so you have to check the fine print. If it says Power Delivery 3.0 with PPS, you are golden. It is the difference between a battery that stays healthy and one that starts to swell or lose capacity after 18 months.
This is making a lot more sense now. But I want to go back to Daniel's specific situation with his OnePlus phone and SuperVOOC. He is frustrated because his universal chargers do not seem to charge his phone as fast as the one that came in the box. Is he stuck carrying that specific OnePlus brick forever? Is there no way to get that 80-watt speed from a universal charger?
This is the one area where the dream of a single universal charger hits a bit of a snag. Some brands, like OnePlus, Oppo, and Xiaomi, still use very high amperage proprietary standards to hit those crazy speeds like 80 watts or 120 watts on a phone. They do this by using specialized cables that are thicker than normal and chargers that communicate in a very specific way. They are basically pushing the limits of what the physical connector can do by using custom hardware.
So if he uses a standard 100-watt power delivery charger on his OnePlus phone, what happens? Does it just refuse to charge?
It will still charge, but it will probably top out at 18 or 27 watts instead of 80. To the phone, the universal charger is a stranger. They can speak a basic common language, power delivery, but they cannot do the high-speed proprietary dance. However, the good news is that the industry is moving toward more compatibility. Many newer proprietary chargers are now also supporting standard power delivery as a secondary mode, and vice versa. For example, the latest high-end universal chargers are starting to include support for more protocols.
So the advice for Daniel would be, for your laptop and power bank, use a high-quality 100-watt Gallium Nitride power delivery charger. For your phone, if you absolutely need that 0 to 100% in 20-minute speed, you might still need the original brick. But for an overnight charge or a desktop up, the universal charger is perfectly fine.
Right? And honestly, for most people, the difference between 27 watts and 80 watts is not as life-changing as it sounds because of the charging curve we talked about. Phones only charge at those peak speeds when they are nearly empty, usually between 0 and 20%. Once they hit 50 or 60%, they slow down significantly anyway to protect the battery. The time difference to get from 0 to 100% might only be 15 or 20 minutes, even if the wattage number looks 3 times higher.
That is a great point. We focus so much on the peak number, but the average speed over an hour might not be that different. It is like a car that can go 200 miles per hour, but only for the first 5 miles of a race. Now, let us talk about the cables again. Daniel is worried about buying things that will be deprecated. We've been talking about 240 watts. Is there anything beyond that on the horizon? Are we going to see 500-watt cables in 3 years?
240 watts is the current limit of the Universal Serial Bus Power Delivery 3.1 specification. To be honest, it is hard to imagine a mobile device needing more than that anytime soon. That is enough to power a high-end gaming laptop with a dedicated graphics card. Even the beefiest 16-inch MacBook Pro only pulls around 140 watts at peak. We are reaching the physical limits of what this specific connector shape can handle without the pins getting too hot.
So if he buys a few high-quality braided 240-watt Type-C to Type-C cables, he is probably set for a long time. They will be the gold standard for the foreseeable future.
I would say so. The only other thing to watch for is data speed. This is another area where people get tripped up. You can have a cable that is amazing at charging, but terrible at moving files. This is the hidden complexity of Universal Serial Bus Type-C.
Wait, really? I thought a Type-C cable was a Type-C cable. If it fits the hole, it should do everything, right? That was the whole promise of the Universal, in Universal Serial Bus.
I wish that were true. Many of the best charging cables, especially the long 6-foot or 10-foot braided ones, are only rated for Universal Serial Bus 2.0 data speeds. That is the same speed we had in the year 2000. It is fine for charging, but if you try to move a 40 gigabyte video file from your phone to your laptop, it will take ages. It is like having a massive fire hose that can only move a few drops of water at a time if that water is data.
That is wild. So you could have a cutting-edge 240-watt charging cable that transfers data like an old iPod cable from 20 years ago. Why would they even make those?
Because high-speed data requires extra shielding and very specific internal wiring that makes the cable thicker, stiffer, and much more expensive. If you want a cable that does everything, fast charging and fast data, you have to look for something rated for Universal Serial Bus 4 or Thunderbolt 4. But those cables are usually shorter, maybe only 3 feet long, and they are much more expensive. For most people, a charging first cable is what they need for their nightstand, and they might keep one data first cable for their desk.
This really highlights why Daniel is confused. It looks like one cable, but it could be one of 4 or 5 different things internally. It is a smart cable, but it might be smart in only one way. So, let us summarize the Savvy Tech Consumer Guide we are building here for Daniel. Step 1. Identify your power-hungry devices. Look at the bottom of your laptop brick and see what the output wattage is.
Exactly. Step 2. Look for a gallium nitride charger with at least 100 watts of total output. This is the sweet spot for size, price, and capability. Make sure it has multiple Type C ports. Avoid chargers that still have those big Type A ports if you want to be future-proof. Those Type A ports are often taking up budget from the total wattage without providing the fast charging benefits.
Step 3. Check for power delivery, 3.0 or 3.1, and specifically look for PPS support for your phone. If it doesn't say PPS on the box or in the specs, and you have a Samsung or a Pixel, you're going to be disappointed with the charging speed.
Step 4. For cables, buy Type C to Type C. Look for that 240 watt rating to ensure it has the best eMarker chip. This ensures that even if you buy a more powerful laptop in 3 years, the cable won't be the bottleneck. And if you need to move data, look for a separate, shorter cable specifically rated for Universal Serial Bus 4.
That is the perfect kit. It declutters the drawer. It covers almost every device on the market, and it is built on standards that are being adopted globally. It feels like we are finally moving out of the era of proprietary nonsense and into an era where things just work.
We are finally getting there. Even Apple, the last major holdout with their Lightning connector, has moved the iPhone to Type C. This means you can finally go on a trip with one cable and one brick and charge your laptop, your phone, your headphones, and your Kindle. It is a massive win for the consumer and for the environment.
I think about how much electronic waste we have generated over the last 20 years just from changing charger standards. It is staggering. Millions of tons of plastic and copper sitting in landfills because a company decided to move a pin 0.5 millimeter to the left. If this Type C standard really sticks for the next decade, the environmental impact alone will be massive.
It is a huge deal. And it is not just about the cables. Think about the chargers themselves. In the past, every time you bought a new phone or a new drill or a new pair of headphones, it came with a cheap, inefficient plastic power brick. Now, companies are stopping that practice because they assume you already have a good one. That only works if the one you have is actually universal and high quality. If we all own 1 or 2 great gallium nitride chargers, we don't need the 50 cheap ones we would have collected over a lifetime.
Right. If the one I have is a proprietary mess, then I am still stuck. This is why buying a high-quality universal one is actually an environmental choice as much as a technical one. It is about buying it once and buying it right.
Exactly. And speaking of quality, one thing I always tell people is to avoid the no-name brands on giant online marketplaces that promise the world for $10. If a charger is pushing 100 watts, it is handling a significant amount of electricity. You want a brand that has proper safety certifications like UL or ETL. 100 watts is enough to cause a serious fire if the internal components are poorly soldered or if the isolation between the high voltage and low voltage sides is insufficient.
That is a scary thought. A cheap charger doesn't just charge slowly. It can actually be dangerous. I have seen teardowns of some of those knockoff chargers where the internal separation is almost non-existent. They skip the filtering components and the safety fuses to save a few cents.
It is terrifying. They are basically fire starters in a plastic shell. A good gallium nitride charger from a reputable brand might cost $50 or $60, but it won't fry your $2,000 laptop or start a fire in your bedroom while you sleep. When you are dealing with high wattage power delivery, the safety circuitry is just as important as the charging speed.
So, pay for the quality. It pays for itself in the long run. I feel like we have given Daniel a pretty solid roadmap here. It is about moving away from those specific proprietary languages and embracing the universal standard of power delivery, backed by the right gallium nitride hardware.
And don't be afraid to throw away those old cables. If it is a Type A to micro USB cable from 5 years ago, it is just taking up space and potentially giving you a subpar experience. Keep one or two for emergencies. Maybe you have an old Kindle or a bike light that still needs it, but clear the rest out. If you haven't used it in a year, you probably won't use it again.
I am going to go back to my junk drawer after we finish here and do exactly that. I think I have about 5 cables in there that I haven't used since 2018. It is time for them to go to the electronic recycling center. I want to get down to that one charger, 2 cables, lifestyle Daniel is dreaming of.
It is liberating, isn't it, to go from a tangled mess of maybe this works to a small, organized kit of I know this works. It reduces that low-level background anxiety we all have about our devices dying.
Absolutely. And hey, for everyone listening, if you have your own weird prompts or technical dilemmas like Daniel's, we would love to hear them. Whether it is about charging, smart homes, or why your old printer refuses to connect to the Wi-Fi, we are here to help. You can reach us at show@myweirdprompts.com or through the contact form on our website.
And if you are finding these deep dives helpful, please consider leaving us a review on your podcast app or a rating on Spotify. It really does help the show reach more people who might be staring at their own tangled drawer of cables wondering what to do. We want to help everyone declutter their digital lives.
Definitely. We really appreciate the support from our listeners. You can find all our past episodes and more information about the show at myweirdprompts.com. We are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and basically anywhere you get your podcasts.
This has been a fun one. Charging tech sounds dry on the surface, but it is the lifeblood of everything we do. Understanding the math and the standards makes life so much smoother. It is the difference between being tethered to a wall for 3 hours and being ready to go in 20 minutes.
It really does. Thanks for the expertise, Herman. Or should I say, Herman Poppleberry, the Sultan of Silicon and Gallium Nitride.
Any time, Corn. It is what I do. Just trying to make the world a little more efficient, one electron at a time.
All right, that is it for today. Thanks for listening to My Weird Prompts. We will be back soon with another exploration of whatever Daniel or the rest of you send our way.
Until next time, stay curious, keep those devices charged safely, and don't be afraid to clean out that junk drawer.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts, as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.